The woman had ridden 3 days into the mountains to buy a cabin from a man who wanted nothing to do with strangers. But when she stepped inside, she found a hidden room her late father had spent his entire life trying to forget. And before the night was over, she would place a wedding ring in the cabin owner's hand and ask him to marry her. What she didn't know was that the secret behind that ring had already been waiting for her for nearly 20 years. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe to the Mountain Tribe for more stories from the wild frontier. It was the autumn of 1887 when Clara Whitmore first saw the mountain cabin. She had expected something smaller, something abandoned. Perhaps a rough shack leaning against the side of a mountain, with broken windows and a roof patched so many times that the original boards could no longer be seen. Instead, the cabin stood alone above a narrow valley, surrounded by towering pine trees and gray stone cliffs. Smoke rose from its chimney. That was the first thing that made Clara stop her horse. The second was the man standing beside the woodshed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a dark wool coat worn thin at the elbows. His beard was streaked with gray, despite the fact that he could not have been much older than 40. A rifle rested against the cabin wall behind him. He did not wave. He did not smile. He simply watched her approach. Clara tightened the reins. She had been warned about him. Everyone in the distant mining settlement below the mountain had given her the same description. Silas Mercer. A man who lived alone. A man who rarely entered town. A man who had refused every offer to sell his cabin. Some said he had killed a man years ago. Others claimed he had been a soldier. One old shopkeeper had told Clara that Silas had once loved a woman who disappeared during a winter storm, and that he had never spoken properly to another person since. Clara had not believed half the stories. But now, standing 50 yards away from the silent mountain man, she found herself wondering if perhaps she should have believed all of them. She brought her horse to a stop. "Mr. Mercer?" The man looked at her. "That's what people call me." His voice was deep and rough, as though it had not been used much. Clara climbed down from the saddle. "My name is Clara Whitmore. I sent word from Red Hollow." "I know." She glanced toward the cabin. "I came about the property." Silas looked at the horse, then at her traveling bag. "You came alone?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I don't need anyone else to buy a cabin." For the first time, something almost resembling amusement passed across his face. "You came a long way for a cabin." "I came a long way because I need one." Silas studied her for several seconds. Then he turned toward the cabin. "Come inside." Clara followed. The cabin was warmer than she expected. There was a stone fireplace at one end, a rough wooden table in the center, shelves filled with dried herbs and jars, and a narrow staircase leading to a sleeping loft. It was simple, clean. Everything had its place. But the moment Clara crossed the threshold, she felt something she could not explain. A strange familiarity. She slowly looked around. The walls were made from dark pine logs. A hunting coat hung beside the fireplace. A lantern rested on the table. Near the back wall stood an old wooden chest. Clara's eyes stopped there. She did not know why. She simply stared. Silas noticed. "That belonged to my father." Clara looked away. "I'm sorry. He died 30 years ago." Silas removed his coat. "So there's no need to be sorry." Clara placed her gloves on the table. "I've come prepared to pay." Silas frowned. "I told your lawyer I wasn't interested in selling. My lawyer told me you changed your mind." "I changed my mind because your lawyer offered twice what the land is worth." "Then you are willing to sell." "Perhaps." Clara reached into her bag and pulled out a folded document. "I have the money." Silas did not take it. Instead, he walked toward the window. "You understand what you're buying?" "A cabin." "No. He pointed toward the valley. You're buying the mountain. Clara looked outside. The valley stretched beneath them, like a forgotten world. No road could be seen from the cabin. No neighboring house. No church steeple. No smoke from another chimney. Only forest, ridges, rock, and distant peaks disappearing into clouds. Silas continued. Snow closes the trail by November, sometimes earlier. Once the snow comes, nobody comes up here until spring. I understand. No. He turned toward her. You don't. Clara met his eyes. Then tell me. Silas remained silent for a long moment. You won't last one winter. Clara almost smiled. I've survived worse. Something in her voice made him pause. She was not speaking about weather. Silas seemed to understand that. But he did not ask. Instead, he walked to the table and examined the papers. Why do you want this place? Clara hesitated. She had rehearsed her answer during the entire journey. She had planned to say that she wanted peace, that she wanted distance from the cities, that she wanted to start again after losing her husband. But none of those things were true. Not completely. She looked at the cabin wall. My father used to talk about these mountains. Silas stopped moving. What was his name? Clara's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. Thomas Whitmore. The room became very still. Silas looked at her. Thomas Whitmore? You knew him? He did not answer. Clara took a step forward. My father disappeared 20 years ago. Silas stared at her. He didn't disappear. Her breath caught. What? He died. Clara felt as if the floor had shifted beneath her. My father died in 1867. Yes. How do you know that? Silas walked toward the fireplace, for the first time since Clara arrived. In his expression, disappeared. He came here. When? The winter before he died. Clara's heart began pounding. What did he want? Silas looked at the fire. He wanted something from me. What? I never gave it to him. Clara stepped closer. What was it? Silas did not answer. Instead, he walked to the old wooden chest beside the wall. He placed his hand on the lid. My father told me never to open this chest. Clara stared. Why? He said some things were safer buried. Was my father involved? Silas looked at her. Your father was involved in something that could have gotten both of us killed. Clara's face went pale. My father was a school teacher. That is what he told people. Silas opened the chest. Inside were old papers, a rusted pocket watch, several letters tied with faded string, and a small wooden box. Clara stepped closer. Then she saw something that made her forget to breathe. The pocket watch. She knew it. She had seen it in her father's belongings. Her mother had kept it locked in a drawer for years. Clara reached toward it. Silas caught her wrist. Don't. She looked at him. That belonged to my father. I know. How? Because he left it here. Clara pulled her hand free. Why would he leave it here? Silas looked toward the mountains. Because he knew he wasn't coming back. Clara felt tears gathering in her eyes. Life, she had believed her father died somewhere far from home. A fever. An accident. Perhaps violence. Her mother had never told her the truth. And now this stranger was telling her that her father had stood inside this very cabin, 20 years earlier. The same cabin she had traveled hundreds of miles to purchase. The same cabin she had somehow felt drawn toward the moment she entered. Where is the rest of his belongings? Clara whispered. Silas closed the chest. Most were destroyed. By whom? He looked at her. That's what I was afraid you'd ask. Outside, the wind began moving through the pine trees. The sound rolled across the mountain like distant thunder. Clara stared at him. You knew I would come. No. Then why did you keep my father's watch? Silas looked toward the closed chest. Because he asked me to. Clara's heart stopped. He asked you to keep it for me? Silas shook his head. No. Then who? Silas took a slow breath. He told me that someday his daughter would come looking for the cabin. Clara stood completely still. He knew I would come here? He hoped you would. Why? Silas's expression hardened again. Because he left something here that only you could find. Clara looked around the cabin. The fireplace, the table, the walls, the floor, the old chest. What did he leave? Silas answered quietly. I don't know. You don't know? He never told me. Silas pointed toward the floor beneath them. Because he told me exactly where to look. Clara followed his finger. One section of the wooden floor was slightly different from the rest. A narrow iron ring was almost completely hidden beneath a faded rug. She knelt. Her fingers touched the cold metal. Silas watched without speaking. Clara pulled. The floorboard lifted. Beneath it was darkness. Not a cellar, not a crawl space. A narrow wooden staircase descending into the earth. Clara stared down into it. Silas took the lantern from the table. Your father called it the winter room. Why? He said it was where the truth was buried. Clara looked at him. And you never opened it? Silas shook his head. My father made me promise. Your father? He was alive when Thomas came here. Clara slowly stood. So your father knew mine? Yes. And whatever is down there connects both families. Silas looked into the darkness. That's what I'm afraid of. Neither of them moved. Then Clara heard something, a faint sound beneath the cabin. 3 slow knocks. Silas immediately raised the lantern. Clara whispered, What was that? Silas listened. Nothing. Then 3 more knocks came from below. Clara's face drained of color. Someone or something was beneath the cabin. Silas reached for the rifle. Clara grabbed his arm. Wait. He looked at her. She was staring at the wooden staircase. My father knew I would come here. Another 3 knocks sounded beneath them. Clara swallowed. Maybe he knew I'd need someone with me. Silas's eyes narrowed. You came here to buy my cabin. I did. But now? Clara looked at the mountain man. She had spent years searching for answers about her father. She had expected a grave. She had expected old letters. She had expected perhaps a name. She had never expected this. She reached into the pocket of her traveling dress and pulled out a small velvet case. Silas looked at it. What is that? Clara opened it. Inside was a simple gold wedding ring. My mother's. Silas stared at her. Why did you bring that? Clara closed her fingers around it, because my father left one final instruction. Silas's expression changed. What instruction? Clara looked directly into his eyes. He told my mother that if I ever found the man who was guarding his secret, I was to trust him with my life. Silas said nothing. Clara's voice trembled, and if he was willing to protect me, she held out the ring. I was supposed to offer him this. The mountain man stared at the ring, then at Clara. You came here to buy my cabin. I did. And now you're offering me a wedding ring? Clara nodded. Yes. Do you even know me? No. Then why would you marry me? Clara looked toward the hidden staircase. Because whatever is down there destroyed my father's life. She looked back at Silas. And I don't intend to face it alone. For several seconds the only sound in the cabin was the wind outside. Then Silas slowly reached toward the ring. But before his fingers touched it, a voice rose from beneath the floor. A man's voice. Old, weak, almost impossible to hear. Clara. She froze. Silas stepped backward. The voice came again. Clara Whitmore. Her eyes widened. She knew that voice. She had not heard it since she was a child. But she knew it. It was her father's voice. And from beneath the cabin, he whispered the one sentence that would change everything. Do not trust the man standing beside you. The voice beneath the cabin left Clara frozen in place. Her father's voice. A voice she had not heard since childhood. Yet the words were unmistakable. Do not trust the man standing beside you. For a long moment, Neither Clara nor Silas moved. The lantern flame trembled between them. Then came silence. Not the ordinary silence of the mountains. This was deeper. The kind of silence that seemed to press against the walls. Clara slowly turned toward Silas. He was standing beside the open floor hatch, one hand resting near his rifle. His face had become unreadable. "You heard it," Clara whispered. Silas nodded. "You know who that was?" "No." "You recognized his voice." "I recognized the voice of a dead man." Clara stared at him. "My father." Silas looked toward the darkness below. "Your father has been dead for 20 years. Then someone is down there." "Yes." "Who?" "I don't know." Clara's fear turned into anger. "You expect me to believe that?" Silas's jaw tightened. "I expect you to believe what your eyes can see." "My eyes see a staircase beneath the cabin that belonged to you. They see my father's watch in your chest. They hear my dead father's voice beneath your floor." She stepped closer. "And you keep telling me you know nothing." Silas did not answer. Clara picked up the lantern. "I'm going down." "No." She turned. "You don't command me. I'm telling you what happens when you go down there." "What?" "You may not come back." Clara stared at him. "Then come with me." Silas looked at the staircase. For the first time, Clara saw something that looked like fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself. Fear of what they might find. He took the rifle from the wall. Then he grabbed a second lantern. "Stay behind me." They descended. The staircase was narrow and old. Each step groaned beneath their weight. The air became colder as they went down. The smell changed too. The cabin above smelled of smoke, pine, and dried herbs. Down here, the air smelled of damp earth and old wood. After 15 steps, the stairs ended. They entered a low chamber carved partly into the mountain. Clara lifted the lantern. The walls were covered with wooden shelves. Old crates stood along one side. There were barrels, rusty tools, bundles of papers, and on the far wall, carved deeply into the wood, was a symbol, a circle. Inside it were 3 mountain peaks. Clara moved closer. "I've seen that." Silas looked at her. "Where?" "In my father's papers." Silas went still. "What papers?" "Letters my mother kept." "What did they say?" "I never understood them." Clara touched the carving. Most of the letters had this symbol. Silas examined it. "My father used it." "Why?" "He belonged to a group." "What group?" Silas remained silent. Clara turned toward him. "Tell me." He looked at the symbol. "The men who used that mark were called the Mountain Brotherhood." Clara frowned. "What did they do?" "They protected something." "What?" Silas shook his head. "I don't know." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Clara stepped closer. "You knew my father." "Yes." "Your father knew my father." "Yes." "They both belong to this brotherhood." Silas said nothing. "And yet you know nothing?" Silas finally looked at her. "I was 17 when my father died. He made me swear I would never ask questions about the brotherhood." "Why?" "Because men had already died for asking." Clara felt a chill. "What happened to them?" Silas looked at the shelves. "They vanished." "How many?" 6. 6 men, 6 families. Clara stared at him. "What did my father discover?" Silas shook his head. "I told you, he came here in the winter of 1867. "And then?" "He stayed 3 nights." "With your father?" "Yes." "What happened on the 4th?" "My father rode into town." "And Thomas?" "He left before dawn." "Where did he go?" Silas pointed toward the north wall. "There used to be a trail through the pass." "Used to be?" "The avalanche destroyed it." Clara's voice softened. "Was that how he died?" Silas hesitated. "No." She looked at him. "What?" "I don't know how he died." "Then why did you say he died?" "Because everyone assumed it." Clara's expression changed. "You said he was dead." "He was." How do you know? Silas looked directly at her. Because I saw his grave. Clara stepped backward. My father's grave? Yes. Where? 2 days north of here. Take me. Not yet. Why? Because if your father left something in this cabin, then the people who wanted it may still be looking. Clara remembered the voice. Her anger disappeared. What people? Silas moved toward the crates. That's the question your father wanted you to answer. He opened one of them. Inside were old newspapers, letters, maps, and several photographs. Clara picked up one photograph. It showed 4 men standing outside the cabin. Silas's father was there. Clara recognized another man immediately. Her father. Young. Smiling. Standing beside them was a third man. Clara stared at him. I know him. Silas turned. Who? My mother's brother. Silas looked at the photograph. Your uncle? He disappeared when I was a child. Silas's expression hardened. He didn't disappear. Clara's heart sank. What happened to him? He was one of the 6. One of the 6 missing men? Silas nodded. Clara looked at the photograph again. There were 4 men. Her father, Silas's father, her uncle, and one final man whose face had been scratched out. She rubbed her thumb across the damaged photograph. Who is the 4th? Silas stared at it. I don't know. Someone scratched his face away. Yes. Why? Because someone wanted his identity erased. Clara turned the photograph over. There was writing on the back. Her father's handwriting. She recognized it immediately. Only 3 were meant to leave. Clara read it twice. Then a second line caught her attention. The secret must never reach the valley. She looked at Silas. What secret? He shook his head. Maybe that's why your father came here. Clara placed the photograph on the crate. Then why did he tell me not to trust you? Silas looked away. I don't know. You must know something. I know that your father was afraid of someone. Who? I don't know. Did he fear your father? No. Then who? Silas looked toward the darkness behind them. The 4th man. Clara frowned. The man whose face was scratched out? Yes. Who was he? I don't know. Suddenly, something moved above them. Both of them froze. A floorboard creaked in the cabin. Silas raised his rifle. Clara whispered, Someone is upstairs. He extinguished one lantern, then the second. Darkness swallowed the room. Clara heard Silas whisper, Stay here. He moved toward the stairs. Clara grabbed his sleeve. No. He looked at her. If someone came here looking for the secret, I need to know. Silas hesitated. Then he nodded. Together they climbed. The cabin above was empty. The front door was still locked. The windows were closed. But something had changed. The chest was open. The papers were scattered across the floor. Clara rushed toward it. My father's watch. Gone. Silas examined the window. There. A thin line of mud crossed the floor. Someone had entered through the rear window. Clara followed the footprints. They led outside. Silas crouched. Fresh. How fresh? Minutes. Clara looked toward the trees. Nothing moved. Then she saw something hanging from a branch. A strip of black cloth. Silas removed it. Inside was a small piece of paper. Clara opened it. 3 words were written across the page. Leave the mountain. She looked at Silas. He looked at the forest. Then they heard a gunshot. The bullet struck the cabin wall. Clara screamed, and pulled her behind the stone fireplace. Another shot shattered a window. Silas raised his rifle. Stay down. Who is shooting? I don't know. Can you see them? No. The forest remained still. Another shot. This time the bullet struck the door. Silas waited. Then silence. Minutes passed. Finally he stood. The attacker was gone. But Clara knew the danger had changed. This was no longer a mystery from her father's past. Someone was still alive. Someone knew she had arrived. and someone wanted her gone. Silas looked at her. We leave at dawn. Clara shook her head. No. You heard the shots. I'm not leaving. Clara, my father brought me here for a reason. Your father is dead. I know. She stepped toward the hidden floor. But whatever he left behind isn't. Silas stared at her. Clara picked up the wedding ring she had placed on the table. The gold band caught the lantern light. I offered you this because I thought you were the man my father trusted. Silas said nothing. Now I don't know whether he trusted you. She walked toward him. But I know something. What? If we are going to uncover what happened to him, I need someone who knows these mountains. Silas looked at the ring. You still want to marry me? Clara's eyes remained fixed on his. Not because my father told me to. Silas waited. Because tonight someone shot at us, out the ring. And I would rather face whatever comes next, beside a man I don't completely trust, than face it alone. Silas stared at her hand. Then, slowly, he took the ring. But he did not put it on. Instead, he closed his fingers around it. There's something you need to know. Clara waited. I lied to you. Her face hardened. About what? Silas looked toward the photograph. The fourth man. Clara's breathing stopped. You know who he is? Silas nodded. Yes. Who? Silas looked at her. My father. Clara stared at him. Your father was the fourth man? He wasn't supposed to be. What does that mean? Silas's voice dropped. My father wasn't the man who betrayed your father. Clara waited. Then who was? Silas looked toward the mountain darkness. The man whose face was scratched out of the photograph. Who? Silas finally answered. Your father. Clara could not speak. My father? Thomas Whitmore was the man they were hunting. Why? Silas stepped closer. Because he stole the secret. What secret? Silas looked down at the floor. The location of a hidden fortune, buried somewhere in these mountains. Clara stared at him. And my father took it? No. Silas's expression changed. He hid it. A sudden noise came from beneath the cabin. 3 knocks, then 3 more. Clara and Silas turned toward the floor. This time the voice came louder. Clara. She froze. Her father's voice. But now it was followed by another voice. A man's voice, whispering from the darkness beneath them. Silas. Silas went pale. Clara looked at him. You know that voice. He slowly nodded. It belongs to my father. The lantern flame flickered, then went out. And in the darkness beneath the cabin, 2 dead men seemed to be calling their children home. The stranger standing at the edge of the hidden valley had been dead for nearly 20 years. Clara knew his face because she had seen it in an old portrait her mother kept locked away. Yet there he stood, alive, watching her from horseback. And when he smiled, Silas quietly raised his rifle and told Clara the truth her father had died trying to hide. This was the man who had destroyed both their families. Before this night was over, Clara would learn why her father had hidden the valley, why Silas's father had betrayed him, and why the wedding ring she carried had been meant for the very man standing beside her. The rider remained motionless on the ridge. Snow drifted between him and the valley below. Clara could barely breathe. She looked at Silas. That's him. Silas did not take his eyes from the stranger. Yes. My mother's first husband. Silas nodded. The man she told everyone had died before I was born. He didn't die. Then where has he been? Silas tightened his grip around his rifle. Waiting. The stranger slowly raised one hand. Thomas was always too clever for his own good. Clara stepped forward. You knew my father. The stranger smiled. I knew him better than anyone. You hunted him. I corrected his mistake. Clara's face hardened. What mistake? The man's horse moved slowly down the ridge. Your father believed land belonged to the people who worked it. He laughed softly. I knew better. Silas raised his rifle. "Stay where you are." The stranger stopped. "Silas Mercer," his voice carried through the valley. "You have your father's eyes." Silas said nothing. "Understood. Something you never did." "What?" Silas's jaw tightened. "My father died alone. He died because he chose the wrong side." Clara looked between them. "What is your name?" The stranger smiled. "You already know it." She shook her head. "I know the name my mother gave me." "Then say it." Clara hesitated. "Edmund Vale." The man's smile widened. "Good," Silas whispered. "Edmund Vale." Clara looked at him. "He's the man who led the Brotherhood." Edmund dismounted. "I didn't come here to kill you." Silas laughed bitterly. "You've killed men for less." Edmund ignored him and looked at Clara. "I came because your father left something unfinished." Clara held the journal against her chest. "What?" "The valley." Edmund gestured toward the river. "Thomas thought he could hide this place forever. He wanted families to live here. He wanted to give away land worth a fortune." Clara shook her head. "It isn't your land." Edmund's expression became cold. "Your father made the same mistake." He reached inside his coat and pulled out an old envelope. Clara froze. Her father's handwriting was visible on the front. "For Clara, if Edmund returns." Her heart dropped. "You have it. Your father gave it to me." "Why?" "Because he knew I would survive him." Edmund tossed the envelope onto the snow. Clara picked it up and opened it. The first line made her eyes fill with tears. "My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, then the mountain has finally brought you home." Thomas explained that he had never intended to abandon his daughter. He had watched from a distance, knowing Edmund had discovered Clara's existence. If Edmund knew where she lived, he could use her to force Thomas out of hiding. So Thomas allowed his family to believe he was dead. Clara covered her mouth. Her entire childhood had been built on a lie. She had spent years believing her father had died, while he had been hiding in the mountains to protect her. The letter continued. "Every winter, I promised myself I would. But every time I tried, Edmund's men found me." Clara looked toward Edmund. Then she reached the final paragraph. "If Edmund ever comes for the valley, trust the man who stands beside you." She looked at Silas. The next sentence made her heart stop. "His father betrayed me. His son did not." Silas looked away. Clara folded the letter. Edmund's expression changed. "Now you understand." "No," Clara said. "I understand my father trusted Silas." Edmund shook his head. "Your father was wrong." Clara looked directly at him. "My father was wrong about many things." She stepped closer. "But he wasn't wrong about you." Edmund's face hardened. "You have his stubbornness, and you have his enemies." Edmund laughed. "You think a wedding ring will protect you?" Clara froze. Silas looked at her. Edmund pointed toward the ring. "Your father wrote about that ring too." Clara looked down. The gold band rested in her palm. "What do you know about it?" "Everything." Edmund's voice lowered. "That ring was not simply a wedding ring." Clara's fingers tightened. "What is it?" "A key." Silas looked surprised. "A key to what?" "The final chamber." Clara stared. "What final chamber?" Edmund pointed toward the valley. "The place your father hid the original land deed." Silas understood. "If the deed exists, the mining company can't claim the valley." "Exactly." Clara looked at the ring. A tiny groove ran along the inside of the gold. She had never noticed it. Her father had designed it himself. "Where is the lock?" she asked. "Under the old chapel." Silas frowned. "The chapel ruins?" Edmund smiled. "The chapel beneath the ruins." Clara suddenly remembered the stone church they had visited. The hidden floor, the box, the journal. Her father had left clues everywhere. Edmund stepped closer. "Give me the ring." Clara closed her hand. "No, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Edmund's men appeared along the ridge. There were 6 of them. Silas immediately moved in front of Clara. Edmund sighed. "I didn't want this." "You always want this," Silas said. Edmund raised his hand. The men began descending. Gunshots cracked through the valley. Silas fired back, forcing the attackers to take cover. "Run!" he shouted. Clara grabbed the journal. They raced toward the chapel. Jonas followed. They crossed the old wooden bridge as bullets struck the railing. One rope snapped. The bridge swung violently. Clara slipped. Silas caught her wrist. "Don't let go." "I won't." He pulled her upward. They reached the other side and rushed into the ruined chapel. Silas shut the door behind them. "The ring," Clara whispered. She searched the stone floor. The final drawing in her father's journal showed 3 mountains, a river, a tree, and a circle beneath a cross. She looked at the broken cross. "Maybe this isn't pointing to the altar." She moved it. Beneath it was a small iron plate. Clara pressed the ring against it. A click sounded. The floor opened. Cold air rushed upward. A narrow staircase descended. Az looked at Clara. "Stay behind me." They went down. The chamber beneath the chapel was larger than either expected. Stone walls surrounded a wooden table. On it sat a metal box. Inside were land deeds, maps, letters, and a list of names. Clara recognized mine owners, bankers, judges, and local officials. The Brotherhood was larger than she had imagined. Silas picked up one document. "This proves everything." Jonas stared at the papers. "Your father spent 20 years collecting evidence." Clara touched the final map. It showed the valley divided into small plots. Each plot carried the name of a family. Thomas had planned to give the land away. Not sell it, not keep it. Give it to families who needed a home. Clara began crying. He really was going to come back. Silas stood beside her. "Yes. Why didn't he?" Jonas answered quietly. "Because someone found him first." Clara looked up. "Who?" Jonas pointed toward the stairs. Edmund stood at the entrance. He held a pistol. "You finally found it." Silas raised his rifle. Edmund shook his head. "You won't shoot me. Try me." Edmund looked at Clara. "Your father understood something." "What?" "People are willing to die for land." Clara looked at the documents. "And you're willing to kill for it." Edmund smiled. "That's the difference between us." Silas stepped forward. "No." Edmund frowned. "The difference is that Thomas believed the mountain belonged to everyone." Silas raised his rifle. "And you believe it belongs to whoever is strong enough to take it." Edmund's expression darkened. "Exactly." He raised his pistol. The chamber fell silent. Then Clara stepped between them. Edmund stared. "Move." "No." "You think he will save you?" Clara looked at Silas. "I don't need him to save me." She turned toward Edmund. "I need him to stand beside me." Silas lowered his rifle slightly. Edmund looked around. Clara held up the land deed. "If I die, these papers reach the nearest settlement." His face changed. Clara continued, "And every name in this book becomes known." The men behind Edmund began whispering. Some lowered their rifles. Then another man lowered his weapon. The Brotherhood began falling apart. Edmund had spent years ruling through fear. But fear only worked while the truth remained buried. Clara had uncovered the truth. Silas had protected her, and the evidence was finally in their hands. Edmund slowly lowered his pistol. "This isn't over." Silas answered, "It is for you." Edmund turned and disappeared into the snow. Silas watched him go. Clara looked at the ring. "My father knew this would happen." Silas shook his head. "No." She looked at him. "He knew it might." Silas took her hand. "He didn't know everything." Clara smiled through her tears. "What did he know?" "That you would need someone beside you, at the ring. Then at Silas. I came here to buy your cabin. I remember. I thought the cabin was the answer." Silas smiled faintly. "It wasn't." Clara looked toward the hidden valley. The mountain was. She rested her head against his shoulder. Behind them, the ruined chapel stood silent beneath the snow. Inside it, Thomas Whitmore's final secret had finally been found. But neither Clara nor Silas knew that one final letter remained hidden beneath the chapel floor. A letter addressed not to Clara, not to Silas, but to the child they might one day have. And its final line contained a warning that would change the future of the mountain forever. The mountain had finally given Clara the truth she had spent her entire life searching for. Her father had not abandoned her. Silas had never betrayed her. And the hidden valley was never meant to belong to one powerful man. But the story was not finished. Edmund Vale had escaped into the mountains with the last remaining members of the Brotherhood. And he still knew something Clara and Silas did not. There was another secret hidden beneath the cabin. A secret Thomas Whitmore had deliberately kept from everyone, including Silas. And when Clara returned to the cabin with Silas, she would discover that her father's final message was not about the past. It was about their future. The snow continued falling as Clara, Silas, and Jonas left the ruined chapel. The valley was quiet again. Too quiet. Edmund and his men had disappeared into the forest. Silas looked toward the northern ridge. He'll come back. Clara held the land deed beneath her coat. I know. He won't give up. Neither did my father. Silas looked at her. Your father spent 20 years fighting men like him. And now we finish it. Jonas shook his head. Not with a gun. Clara looked at him. Then how? With proof. He pointed toward the documents. If these papers reach Red Hollow, Edmund loses everything. The Brotherhood, the mining company, the men who protected them, all of it. Silas nodded. But we have to get them there alive. They began the long journey back toward the cabin. By late afternoon, the snow had become heavier. The trail nearly disappeared. Silas rode ahead, checking the path. Clara followed close behind. The first time since arriving in the mountains, she felt strangely calm. She had come believing she was purchasing a cabin. Instead, she had found her father's grave, his secret, an enemy she never knew existed, and a man she had never expected to trust. Silas noticed her silence. What are you thinking? About my father. What about him? All those years I thought he left us. Silas remained quiet. My mother never hated him, Clara continued. She never spoke badly about him. I didn't understand why. She probably knew more than she told you. Clara looked toward the mountains. Maybe she was protecting me. Silas nodded. She was. Clara smiled faintly. I wish I had known. Silas looked back at her. Some truths only survive because they're hidden. They reached the cabin just before dark. Silas dismounted. He immediately noticed something wrong. The front door was open. He raised his rifle. Stay behind me. Clara climbed down. Someone has been here. They entered slowly. The cabin looked almost untouched. The fire had gone cold. The table was empty. The chest was still open. Silas searched the room. Nothing. Clara walked toward the fireplace. Something caught her eye. A small piece of wood had been moved. She touched it. The fireplace shifted slightly. Silas turned. What is it? Clara pushed again. A hidden compartment opened inside the stone wall. There was a small leather pouch inside. Clara pulled it out. Her hands trembled. This belonged to my father. Silas looked at the pouch. Open it. Inside was a silver key and another folded letter. Clara unfolded it. Her father's handwriting appeared again. Clara, if you have found the valley, then you have already learned the truth about Edmund. But there is one truth I could not leave with the others. Clara swallowed. Silas stood beside her. She continued reading. The valley was never the greatest thing I discovered. She looked at Silas. What does that mean? He shook his head. Keep reading. The letter continued. Beneath the cabin lies a second chamber. I built it with Silas's father, but I never told him what it contained. Silas stared at the page. My father helped build it? Clara nodded. The next sentence was worse. If Edmund ever discovers the valley, he will search for this chamber. He must never find it. Clara looked toward the floor. The hidden room. Silas remembered the staircase. They had searched the first chamber, but they had never looked beneath it. He moved the rug. The iron ring was still there. They opened the floor. Clara held the lantern. They descended. The first underground chamber was exactly as they had left it. But behind the wooden shelves was another door. Silas ran his hand over the wall. I never knew this was here. Clara inserted the silver key. The lock turned. The door opened. Inside was a narrow room. There was no gold, no weapon, no treasure. Only a wooden desk, a chair, and a large collection of journals. Clara picked up the first. Thomas Whitmore had written about every year he spent in the mountains, his discoveries, his fears, his attempts to protect the valley, his encounters with the Brotherhood. Then Clara found something unexpected. A journal belonging to Silas's father. She looked at him. He wrote everything down. Silas took it. The first pages described the Brotherhood's origins. It had begun as a group of settlers who protected isolated mountain families from land thieves and mining companies. But Edmund had eventually taken control. He turned protection into power. The Brotherhood became corrupt. Men who refused to obey disappeared. Families were forced from their land, and Thomas had discovered the truth. Silas turned another page. My father knew. Clara nodded. He knew what Edmund was doing. Silas continued reading. Then his expression changed. What? Clara asked. He handed her the page. It contained a confession. Silas's father admitted that he had once helped Edmund, not because he wanted money, because Edmund had threatened Silas. He had threatened to kill his son if he refused. Silas sat down. He protected me. Clara knelt beside him. He was trying to keep you alive. Silas stared at the journal. I hated him for years. You didn't know. I thought he betrayed Thomas because he was greedy. Clara placed her hand over his. He betrayed him because he was afraid. Silas looked at her. Does that make it right? No. She paused. But it makes it human. Silas closed the journal. Then Clara noticed another document on the desk. It was a marriage certificate. She unfolded it. Her eyes widened. Silas looked at her. What is it? She read the names. Thomas Whitmore, Eleanor Vale, Clara's parents. Silas stared. Eleanor Vale? My mother. Your father was Edmund's wife? Clara nodded slowly. Before she married Thomas. Silas understood. That's why Edmund wanted your father dead. Clara looked at the certificate. My mother knew. A voice came from behind them. Yes. They turned. Jonas stood in the doorway. Clara looked at him. Your mother loved Thomas. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Why didn't she tell me? Because Edmund threatened you. All my life? All your life. Clara looked down. Everything she remembered suddenly seemed different. Her mother's silence, her father's disappearance, the strange warnings, the letters, the ring. None of it had been random. They had all been pieces of the same protection. Jonas stepped toward the desk. There's one more thing. He pointed to the final journal, Thomas's final entry. Clara opened it. The writing was weak. The final pages were dated 1878, 11 years after the date everyone believed Thomas had died. Clara read silently. Then she began crying. What does it say? Silas asked. She handed him the journal. Thomas had written that he was sick. He knew he did not have much time. He had tried to return home, but Edmund's men had found him. He had escaped into the mountains one final time. Before dying, he returned to the cabin. He buried his final message. Then he wrote one last paragraph. I cannot give my daughter the life I wanted for her, but perhaps I can leave her a man who will. Silas stopped reading. Clara looked at him. The final sentence was addressed directly to Silas. If Clara ever comes to this cabin, do not let her believe she must carry my burden alone. Silas closed the journal. Neither spoke. Then Clara noticed another line beneath the final entry. It had been added later. Different handwriting. Silas's father's. I will not fail his daughter. Clara wiped her tears. She understood now. The wedding ring had never been a command. It had been a promise passed from one generation to another. A promise that Clara would never have to face the mountain alone. Silas reached into his coat. He pulled out the ring she had given him. I should give this back. Clara frowned. Why? Because you shouldn't marry me because of your father. Clara stepped closer. I'm not. Then why? She smiled. Because when everyone else wanted something from me, you only wanted me to survive. Silas looked at her. I don't know what kind of husband I'll be. I don't know what kind of wife I'll be. He smiled. Then we'll learn. Clara held out her hand. Silas placed the ring on her finger. This time it was not a promise from her father. It was her choice. The next morning they rode toward Red Hollow. Jonas carried the documents. Clara carried her father's journals. Silas rode beside her. They reached the settlement 3 days later. The evidence was delivered to the local authorities. The names of the Brotherhood members were exposed. The mining company's illegal claims were challenged. Several men fled. Others surrendered. Edmund Vale disappeared into the wilderness. For months people searched for him. They never found him. Some said he crossed the northern border. Others believed he died alone in the mountains. Clara never learned which story was true, and she eventually stopped wondering. Because spring came, the snow melted. Families began arriving. Thomas Whitmore's dreams slowly became real. The land was divided among settlers. A small school was built near the river. A church stood on the hillside. And the old cabin became Clara and Silas's home. They repaired the roof, replaced the broken windows, built a second room. Silas planted an orchard below the cabin. Clara started keeping her father's journals on a shelf above the fireplace. Years later, visitors would ask why she had chosen to live in such a remote place. She always gave the same answer. I came here to buy a cabin. Then she would look at Silas. And I found a home. One winter evening, many years after the events that changed their lives, Clara sat beside the fireplace. Snow covered the windows. Silas entered carrying firewood. Their children were asleep upstairs. He placed the wood beside the hearth. Clara looked at the old wooden chest, her father's chest, the one that had started everything. She smiled. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come? Silas sat beside her. Every day. What do you think? I think the mountain would have found another way. Clara laughed softly. That's what my father used to believe. Silas took her hand. The wedding ring still rested on her finger, worn now, scratched from years of work, but still shining. Clara looked at it. It was supposed to be my mother's ring. Silas nodded. It became yours. She smiled. No. She looked toward the sleeping children upstairs. Outside, the wind moved through the pine trees. The same wind that had once frightened Clara when she first arrived. Now it sounded like a lullaby. The cabin was no longer lonely. The valley was no longer hidden. And the secret that had destroyed 2 families had finally become the foundation of a new one. Thomas Whitmore had died, believing he would never see his daughter again. But in the end, his final wish came true. Clara found the mountain. She found the truth, and she found the man her father trusted with her future. The cabin she came to buy became the home where she built a life. The wedding ring she carried as a desperate promise became a symbol of a choice she made for herself. And the mountain that had once been filled with fear became the place where 2 people finally found peace. Sometimes, the thing we travel across the world to find isn't what we expected. Clara thought she was searching for a cabin. She was really searching for the truth. She thought she was buying a piece of land. She was really finding a home. And she thought the wedding ring was her father's final instruction. It wasn't. It was his final gift. Because he knew that someday his daughter would need someone beside her. And on that lonely mountain, she found him. If you enjoyed Clara and Silas's story, like this video, leave a comment with the moment that surprised you most, and subscribe to the Mountain Tribe for more frontier romances, mountain mysteries, and forgotten stories from the wild.